Thank you, Madam President. Last night, the Iranian regime launched a cold-blooded attack against 10 million civilians, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, men, women, and children of every faith. In an unprecedented act of aggression, Iran fired almost 200 ballistic missiles, forcing millions of people into bomb shelters. These scenes have not been witnessed since the Blitz in London. This was a deliberate attempt to strike at the very heart of our society, targeting the most sacred places in Israel, holy sites, mosques, synagogues, and churches. To Iran, there is no holy ground, no purity of life worth protecting. But even before the missiles rained down, the bloodshed had already begun. Just minutes before this assault, Palestinian terrorists opened fire on civilians, murdering 7 innocent people, young women, mothers protecting their babies, tourists. This is the reality we face every single day. Terror at our borders, missiles overhead, bullets in our streets. The Council must understand the situation Israel is forced to live in. We are under attack. This was not just an escalation. It was a direct assault on our very existence. The world watched silently as Iran funded and directed attacks against us for the past year, arming and training their proxies for decades, and the international community sat quiet. The silence, the routine calls for de-escalation, only emboldened Iran. The result, last night's onslaught. Now the world must step up. Iran must pay a heavy price for this attack. Anything less is complicity. Do not be fooled by the fact that Israeli air defenses performed near miracles last night, saving countless lives beyond imagination. We also appreciate our partners for their assistance in defending against Iran's attack. Iran's failure does not diminish the evil behind their actions, the intentions. What we witnessed was nothing short of pure, unrestrained evil. This is the largest missile assault in Israel's history. They have openly launched hundreds of missiles into civilian areas. Today, the mask is off, and their evil is now laid bare for all the world to see. The Ayatollah's regime has revealed its true nature, not just as the world's greatest sponsor of terror, but as an active, direct aggressor. For years, Iran has armed terrorists and tyrannical regimes. We all know their weapons are responsible for the death of countless innocent civilians all across the globe, from Europe's war zones to terror attacks in the Middle East, from embassies in Latin America to assaults on US personnel. There is no corner of the world where Iran's blood-stained fingerprints cannot be found. They are not just Israel's enemy, they are an enemy of all civilized nations, an enemy to their own people who they brutally oppress, and an enemy to all nations they work to destabilize. Until now, they had largely operated in the shadows, using all their proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They carried out their dirty work. But last night, that mask was ripped away, the mask that their leaders wear in these very halls. Iran no longer hides behind others. They have proudly stepped into the open as the architects of chaos and destruction. And now the world can see their true face. Iran launched the largest ballistic missile attack in history, justifying it as a vengeance for the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah. That is the reason. In doing so, they relinquished any deniability and claimed full ownership over Hezbollah's actions. They say that. That is the reason for the attack, because of Nasrallah. So basically, they own the deeds of Hezbollah today. Let me remind you all. Allow me to remind you of some of Hezbollah's crimes against the world. In 1983, they bombed the United States barracks in Beirut, murdering 241 US servicemen. That same year, they bombed the US embassy in Beirut, murdering 63. In 1992, they bombed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, killing 29 people and wounding 242. 2 years later, same place, Buenos Aires, they bombed the Jewish Community Center, murdering 85 and injuring over 300. Before 9/11, Hezbollah were responsible for more American deaths than any other terrorist organization. None of this even mentions the thousands of Lebanese people and Syrians that they brutally murdered at the altar of their tyrannical masters. In the past year alone, since October 8th, Hezbollah has launched over 9,000 missiles and rockets, over 1,000 anti-tank missiles and hundreds of attack drones. They have made over 70,000 Israeli civilians refugees in their own country. All the while, they have been attempting to infiltrate our communities to commit an October 7th-style massacre. Behind every murder, every rocket launch, every plot stands the Iranian regime. Let me be clear. Israel will defend itself. We will act. And let me assure you, the consequences Iran will face for their actions will be far greater than they could ever have imagined. Let me ask the Council and the entire world, how would any of you react if faced with such an attack? What would any nation do if hundreds of ballistic missiles were raining down on your civilians, your cities, your places of worship? The scale of this attack is unimaginable, and yet Iran is determined to escalate further. This is not just a threat to Israel, this is a threat to the entire world. We will defend our people, and our response will be swift and decisive. Those who attack us will face serious consequences. For every missile fired, we will respond with strength. For weeks, I have sat in this council warning of the growing threat Iran poses, urging you to take decisive action against this regime. I warned that Iran's desire for dominance would not stop at Israel's border, but the inaction of this council has emboldened them. And now the missiles falling on Israel are the direct result of that failure to act. The time for complacency is over. The Iranian regime has shed all deniability. They are no longer silent puppet masters. They are bloodthirsty aggressors, reveling in their violence and destruction. The world cannot afford to ignore this reality any longer. We demand immediate, crippling sanctions on Iran. The IRGC must be designated as the terrorist organization it is. Do not let yourselves be fooled by moderate Iranian president. I saw the way they were received here last week. The meetings, the clapping. Iran's policy is dictated by its supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. And under his rule, the regime has grown more aggressive and murderous than ever. Iran's true face is one of terror, death, and chaos. They do not care about life, they do not respect their own religion, and they have targeted their fellow Muslims without hesitation. The time for empty calls for de-escalation is over. How can you do that? To equate Israel, a nation simply wishing to live in peace, acting in defense of its people, with an aggressor bent on our destruction, is not just wrong. It is a grotesque and immoral distortion of reality. This is not a conflict between two equal sides. This is a battle between a sovereign country defending its right to exist and a regime that seeks nothing less than our extinction. And I repeat what I said last time. We have no border with Iran. We have no dispute with them. Ask yourself why they spend so much money and energy to build those rockets and to attack us. What is the reason behind it? Cause for de-escalation is a false symmetry, an absurd equivalence between the protector and the destroyer. Tonight actually, the Jewish people will welcome the new year. The past year has been the most challenging in our country's history, but we will prevail. In this coming year, we will not stop until all 101 hostages are back at their families' tables. Let the world understand, Israel will defend itself, and will do so with justice and strength. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel, and I'll give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, we congratulate you, Madam President, for assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, and thank you for the convening this emergency meeting to address the ongoing Israeli aggression against Lebanon and critical situation in the region. We acknowledge Slovenia for its successful conclusion of the presidency in September. Madam President, distinguished delegates, for a year now, the apartheid and occupying regime of Israel has continued its brutality in occupied Palestine with full impunity. And now this regime is extending its brutal aggressive war to Lebanon and targeting innocent people day and night across the border and deep inside the territory. The regime is pushing the region to the edge of an all-out unprecedented catastrophe. Israel has no intention to pursue peace or a ceasefire. Regrettably, the UN Security Council has remained paralyzed due to the United States' obstruction of any effective decision by this body. Unwavering support provided by the United States, United Kingdom, and certain Western states to Israel has given a carte blanche to this aggressive terrorist regime for all sorts of sinister behavior. No more than ever, this regime has become a serious threat to international peace and security. The only way to prevent further escalation is clear. Israel must immediately cease its war on Gaza, and its attacks on Lebanon must stop. Madam President, distinguished delegates, as we informed the members of the Council in our letter yesterday, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran launched a series of missile strikes targeting the military and security positions of the Israeli regime. Iran's action was in full accordance with the inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, and a direct response to the regime's repeated acts of aggression against Iran, including the violation of Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity during the past months. Our invocation of the right of self-defense, followed by an extended period of restraint, reflects Iran's responsible approach to regional and international peace and security at a time when the illegal action and genocide carried out by this occupying apartheid regime against the Palestinian people, as well as its repeated military aggression against Lebanon and Syria, continue. Iran's missile strikes were a necessary and proportionate response to Israeli continued terrorist aggressive acts over the past 2 months. This includes the violation of Iran's sovereignty, the assassination of political leader of Hamas in Tehran and Iranian citizens, the targeting and wandering Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, and to recent assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the resistance and Secretary General of Hezbollah, and General Abbas Nil Furushan, an Iranian military advisor in Beirut. I wish to mention the key facts that clearly demonstrate Iran's action under self-defense is fully justified, lawful, and firmly grounded in international legal principles. On 1st April 2024, Israel presently attacked Iran's diplomatic mission in Damascus, Syria, in a blatant violation of international law. specifically the principle of inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises, Iran immediately sought the Council's condemnation. What was this body's response? Nothing. Rather than condemning Israel's act of aggression, the Council merely called for Iran's restraint and even refrained from issuing a press statement proposed by Russia. After 10 days of silence from the Security Council, Iran has no choice but to use its inherent right under international law to respond to this severe violation. On 31st July 2024, Israel committed yet another act of aggression by assassinating Mr. Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas political leader and the former Prime Minister of Palestine, while he was an official guest of the Iranian government in Tehran. This was a flagrant breach of Iran's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Despite Iran's call for action, the Council again failed to act. Meanwhile, several states, including the United States, urged Iran to maintain restraint, citing ongoing ceasefire negotiations. We respected these calls for diplomacy, yet no ceasefire materialized and Israel only grew bolder. Again, we witnessed another heinous crime by Israel, this time through the detonation of communication devices targeting the innocent people of Lebanon. A larger number of innocent civilians were killed and injured, including Iran's ambassador to Lebanon. This was yet another manifestation of state terrorism. Following, Israel carried out a blatant act of terrorist aggression using US-supplied thousands-pound bunker busters to assassinate Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and a symbol of resistance against Israeli occupation and aggression in Lebanon. This brutal attack resulted in the martyrdom of numerous innocent people, including Hezbollah leader and Iranian General Abbas Nir Furushan, while also leaving many civilians wounded. This egregious act underscored once more the regime's continued reliance on violence and terror. Madam President, the Islamic Republic of Iran has consistently pursued peace and stability for the region and called for an immediate ceasefire and the cessation of civilians' casualties, a position we have maintained for over a year. Yet, experience has proven that Israel only understands the language of force. Diplomacy has repeatedly failed, as Israel views restraint not as a gesture of goodwill, but as a weakness to exploit. Each act of restraint taken by Iran has only emboldened Israel to commit even greater crimes and more acts of aggression. Consequently, Iran's response was necessary to restore balance and deterrence. Israel must understand that each act of aggression it makes is not unpunished and will be met with consequences. This is the cost this regime must bear. Contrary to the regime which consistently considered innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure as legitimate target for aggression and massacre, Iran's response has only targeted the regime's military and security installation with its defensive missile strike, because the Islamic Republic of Iran is grounded in ethical principles and noble teaching of Islam and full compliance with the principles of distinction under international humanitarian law. Madam President, distinguished delegates, the international community cannot afford to remain silent. We reiterate our call on this Council to respond with urgency and determination. The Security Council must intervene to stop Israeli continued aggression and war crimes against Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria, and to prevent the situation from escalating into a full-scale regional war. Furthermore, the Security Council must force Israel to comply with its obligation on the resolution this body adopted Israel must fully implement Resolution 1701. Finally, Madam President, we strongly warn against any further act of aggression by Israeli terrorist regime against our national security and vital interests. Iran is fully prepared to take further defensive measures if necessary to protect its legitimate interests and defend its territorial integrity and sovereignty against any act of military aggressions and the illegal use of force. In this regard, Iran will have no hesitation. In conclusion, the regime of the United States and the United Kingdom regime, notorious enablers of the Israeli regime, along with France, have once again cynically attempted to justify Israeli heinous crimes under the guise of self-defense, shifting the blame onto Iran. While the Israeli regime must be held accountable for the atrocity crimes and cannot disregard the U.S. complicity in Israel's crimes. Israel's warmongering relies on U.S. regime, military support and political backing. American weapons constitute the major part of Israeli weaponry and ammunition used in Gaza, and therefore the United States is implicated in every aspect of Israel's atrocity. The vast majority of bombs Israeli drops on Gaza and Lebanon are US-made. The US regime even provides Israel with jet fuel. The US has sent so many arms to Israel since October 7 that the Pentagon has struggled to find sufficient cargo aircraft to deliver the materials. If there were even a shred of honesty in their concerns for the loss of innocent people lives in Gaza or Lebanon, or for the spread of war across the region, they could easily strip Israel of the tools it used to commit those atrocities. Yet their actions reveal their true intent to embolden Israel's criminal actions. Thank you.
Stay ahead with our cutting-edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.